Hello everyone and welcome to RadioCSIRT English Edition, your daily appointment with cybersecurity news. I'm Marc Frederic Gomez, your French cybersecurity voice for today's threat landscape. I hope you're doing well. Today is Monday, December 29th, 2025, episode 64. The year 2025 is coming to an end, and it offers a rare opportunity in our field to objectively evaluate a vulnerability forecast made nearly 1 year in advance, now confronted with consolidated real-world data. Today, RadioCSIRT revisits the year-end assessment of the 2025 CVE forecast published by the First Foundation, and more specifically, what this assessment reveals about the actual level of maturity reached by vulnerability forecasting as an operationally usable discipline, sometimes referred to as exposure science. This is not about anticipating 2026, nor about formulating operational recommendations, but about understanding what was forecast, what actually occurred, and what the gap or the alignment allows us to state objectively. In February 2025, the First Foundation published an annual forecast of the number of vulnerabilities expected to be registered as CVEs over the calendar year. The model announced a mean value of 45,505 vulnerabilities, with a 90% confidence interval ranging from 41,142 to 49,868 CVEs. This interval is not a vague estimate. It corresponds to a statistically defined range within which the model estimates with an explicit level of confidence that the real value has 9 chances out of 10 of being located. With 2 days remaining before the end of the year 2025, the number of CVEs published has reached 49,183. This figure leads to several observations. First, it lies fully within the statistical interval announced nearly 1 year earlier. Second, it is positioned very clearly in the upper range of the forecast, confirming a behavior already observed in previous years. Real growth tends to follow the highest scenario anticipated by the model. From a metric standpoint, the mean absolute percentage error relative to the central value is 7.48%. However, when referring to the upper range of the interval, the deviation drops to approximately 1.39%. In other words, organizations that anticipated their workload based on the upper range of the forecast planned with a very high level of accuracy. This point is important because it shows that forecasting the volume of vulnerabilities over an annual horizon is no longer merely descriptive. It becomes sufficiently stable to serve as a credible planning framework, particularly for sizing analysis, triage, and remediation capacities. First complements this annual approach with quarterly forecasts, intended to refine expectations throughout the year. For the fourth quarter of 2025, the forecast announced 12,972 CVEs, with a 90% confidence interval ranging from 11,815 to 14,129. The actual number of CVEs published during this quarter stands at 12,359. Here again, the observed value lies slightly below the predicted mean, but remains solidly within the announced statistical interval. The relative error is below 5%. At this level of precision, forecasting becomes operationally exploitable. This means it is possible to announce, with a high level of confidence, an order of magnitude for the quarterly vulnerability flow, and to adjust accordingly the workload of vulnerability management teams, triage cycles, remediation sprints, and arbitrations between treatment and monitoring. What matters here is not the perfection of the model, but its predictive stability. Another major element of this 2025 year-end assessment does not reside solely in the numbers themselves, but in the evolution of the ecosystem. Vulnerability forecasting is no longer an isolated initiative carried solely by First. At Cisco, Jerry Gamblin has developed the CVEforecast.org platform. This platform explores machine learning approaches applied to CVE time series, notably through XGBoost type models. This project is distinguished by several characteristics. Models are compared transparently, data is public, and performance is measured using explicit metrics, including MAPE. This approach contributes to standardizing model evaluation and to moving a vulnerability forecasting away from opaque or proprietary logics. For its part, the Circle in Luxembourg has for several years been enriching its vulnerability lookup platform. Beyond simple CVE indexing, the platform now integrates mechanisms referred to as sightings These make it possible to indicate whether a vulnerability is observed in real context, public discussions, reported exploitation, integration into attack chains, or conversely, the absence of known activity. These data do not directly fall under volume forecasting, but they constitute an essential foundation for predicting not only how many vulnerabilities will appear. First explicitly states that a forecast which does not change resource allocation is not yet fully useful. Ongoing work therefore focuses on more refined dimensions, forecasting CVEs as distributions, anticipating dominant CWE classes, modeling exploitation, predicting CNA behavior, and analyzing the evolution of disclosure regimes. These topics introduce complex methodological challenges, particularly related to time series breaks, heavy-tailed distributions, and structural changes in publication and responsible disclosure practices. But these are precisely the dimensions that will allow a transition from workload forecasting to genuine risk forecasting. The year-end assessment for 2025 therefore allows one clear statement to be made. Vulnerability forecasting has reached a level of maturity sufficient to be used by defensive teams as a robust probabilistic framing instrument, not as an automated decision-making tool, not as a promise of certainty, but as a strategic framing mechanism based on open, verifiable, and reproducible models. This is not the end of the road, but it is a tipping point, the point at which cybersecurity begins to structurally integrate predictive logics, comparable to those long used in other risk-driven domains. And that's it. This edition ends here. I hope it provided you with clear, accurate, and useful information. Until then, we don't think, we patch. If you are a new listener, feel free to subscribe to the RadioCSIRT podcast. RadioCSIRT is available in English, Italian, Spanish, and French. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, Deezer, and Spotify. All open source intelligence links used in this episode are available on RadioCSIRT.com. See you tomorrow for a new episode. Take care. Goodbye.